The sun beat down on my worn Stetson, kicking up dust with every step old Jeb took. We were a familiar sight on these roads. Jeb, my trusty mare, and I, Silas Blackwood, a horse trader by trade and a wanderer by necessity. Today, our destination was the train station in Fort Worth, a bustling hub where I hoped to turn a tidy profit on the 3 strong geldings I was leading. The air was thick with the scent of horse sweat, coal smoke, and the faint, sweet smell of possibility. I'd been on my own since my wife Mary passed some years back. It was just me and our daughter Clara. She was a fiery spirit, just like her mother, with a laugh that could chase away the darkest clouds. A few years ago, she'd gone off to live with her Aunt Martha in San Angelo, a town I figured was safer than the dusty trails I called home. We exchanged letters, though not as often as I'd have liked. The thought of her kept me going on the long, solitary nights. As we neared the station, the usual cacophony of the West swelled around me. The clang of blacksmiths, the shouts of vendors, the distant shriek of a train whistle. I tethered the horses to a hitching post near the auction block, a place I knew well. This was where fortunes were made and lost, where dreams took flight or crashed to the ground. I straightened my vest, adjusted my hat, and prepared to haggle. Small crowd had already gathered around the block, but something felt off. The usual boisterous chatter was subdued, replaced by a nervous murmur. I pushed my way through, my eyes scanning for familiar faces, for anyone I could strike a deal with. Then I saw it. Or rather, I saw her. A young woman stood on the auction. You block! Her head bowed, her shoulders slumped, her hands were bound in front of her, and heavy iron chains encircled her ankles. The rough hemp dress she wore hung loose on her slender frame. A chilling wave of recognition washed over me, so potent it stole the air from my lungs. It was the way her dark hair, despite being disheveled, caught the light. It was the delicate curve of her neck, even in her despair. And then, as she slowly raised her head, I saw her eyes, wide, terrified, and unmistakably, devastatingly, my daughter's Clara. My Clara here, on an auction block, in chains. The world tilted. The sounds of the station faded into a dull roar. My blood ran cold, then hot with a fury I hadn't known I possessed. The auctioneer, a corpulent man with a greasy mustache and a cruel smile, was spouting his vile spiel, describing her as if she were a piece of livestock. My hands balled into fists, my knuckles white. Going once, going twice, the auctioneer's voice boomed, cutting through the haze of my shock. No, this couldn't be happening. Not my Clara, not my daughter. The auctioneer, a man named Bartholomew, Barty Thorne, leered at the silent crowd. A fine, strong girl, folks. Good for honest labor, quick hands, quiet disposition. What am I bid for this prime piece of property? His words were like a physical blow. My throat was dry, my voice caught. The anger was a roaring fire in my chest, but I knew I had to be smart. Rushing in like a wild bull would only make things worse. I needed information. I needed a plan. Suddenly, a voice from the back of the crowd, reeking of cheap whiskey and desperation, shouted, $10! A ripple of nervous laughter went through the onlookers. Thorne merely snorted, disgusted. $10 for a girl. Like this? Are you mad, old man? We're not selling rags here. My eyes darted around, searching for a face, any face that might hold a glimmer of decency. Most averted their gaze, some out of shame, others out of a perverse curiosity. I saw a young man, barely more than a boy, his face pale and sickened, trying to disappear into the crowd. I caught his eye, a silent plea passing between us. He quickly looked away. Then, a new voice, low and gruff, cut through the tension. $50. It was Big Jim, a rancher from the north, known for his vast lands and even vaster temper. He had a reputation for being tough, but also for being fair, in his own way. He was looking at Clara with a strange mixture of pity and assessment, as if trying to calculate her worth. $50, now that's more like it. Thorn beamed, rubbing his hands together. Any more bids? My mind raced. $50. It was more than I had in my pocket, but I had the horses. My 3 geldings were worth at least 100 apiece, maybe more to the right buyer. But selling them now, on the spot, to get the cash. It was a risk. What if the auction ended too quickly? What if someone else outbid me? $100, I heard myself shout, the words raw and hoarse. The crowd shifted, surprised. Thorn's eyes, which had been dismissive, narrowed on me. He recognized me. Everyone knew Silas Blackwood, the horse trader. Well, well, Silas Blackwood, Thorn sneered, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Didn't know you were in the market. You were the housemaid. You got $100 in that worn-out wallet, old man. My hand went to my sidearm, a reflex more than a threat. I needed to keep my composure. I have the horses, I said, my voice steadier now. 3 prime geldings. Tied right there, worth more than double your paltry bid. Barty Thorn considered this, his gaze shifting to my horses. He knew their value. He also knew I was desperate. This wasn't just about money for him. It was about power, about humiliation. Show me the money, Blackwood, or those horses are as good as mine in a trade. Big Jim grunted, clearly annoyed, but didn't raise his bid. He wasn't about to get into a bidding war with a man who looked like he was about to explode. I needed to act fast. I turned to a grizzled old-timer, a stable hand named Jed, who I'd known for years. Jed, I rasped, I need to sell these horses fast, for whatever they'll fetch. That's my daughter up there. Jed's eyes, usually cynical, softened. He knew Clara from when she was a little girl, riding alongside me to the markets. He nodded grimly. I'll see what I can do, Silas, but hurry, that snakethorn won't wait long. As Jed moved towards the horses, I faced Thorn again, my gaze locked on Clara, who had finally looked up, her eyes meeting mine. A flicker of hope, fragile and desperate, ignited in her gaze. I offered her a small, reassuring nod, a silent promise that I would not let her go. $200, another voice. My head snapped around. It was a well-dressed man, thin and hawkish, whom I vaguely recognized as a businessman from back east, rumored to have shady dealings. His eyes held no pity, only cold calculation. My blood ran cold again. $200. My horses might not even fetch that much, not quickly, not under pressure. The clock was ticking. Panic began to set in. $200 was a sum I couldn't easily lay my hands on, not with the quickness required. Thorn's smirk widened. 200 from Mr. Caldwell. A man who knows value when he sees it. Any advance on 200? I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Jed, his face grim. Silas, I got 60 for the first gelding, and I've got a buyer for the other 2, but he's still dickering. It'll take time I didn't have. I looked at Clara, her small frame trembling, her eyes fixed on me. She was so close, yet so far. The thought of her being sold to Caldwell, or anyone, sent a tremor of pure terror through me. Then a woman's voice, clear and strong, cut through the tension. $250. Everyone turned. It was Martha Jones, the owner of the local saloon. The Lucky Nugget. Martha was a force of nature, a woman who'd carved out her own empire in a man's world. She was tough as nails, with eyes that saw everything and a heart that, despite her gruff exterior, was rumored to be kind. She stood tall, her hands on her hips, her gaze challenging Thorn. She had known Mary and she had known Clara since she was a babe. Thorn scowled. He didn't like Martha. She was too independent, too sharp. Well, well, Martha, buying a new, serving girl, are we? I hear you've got a problem with staff keeping their hands off the whiskey. Martha ignored his taunt. The girl's worth more than your ill-gotten gains, Thorn. 250. Do you hear a higher bid? Her voice was steady, unwavering. A collective sigh of relief seemed to sweep through the crowd, or at least from those who still possessed a shred of decency. Caldwell hesitated, then shrugged, stepping back. He wasn't interested in a bidding war with Martha, going once, going twice, for $250 to Martha Jones. Thorne slammed his gavel down with a disgusted thud. He hated losing. My relief was immense, almost overwhelming. Clara was safe for now. As Thorne's men began to unlock Clara's chains, I rushed forward, pushing through the remaining crowd. Martha met me halfway, her expression serious. "Silas," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "She's been through hell." I knelt, pulling Clara into my arms. She was shaking, her body cold, but she clung to me, burying her face in my shoulder. "Papa," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. "Oh, Papa." "It's all right, darling," I murmured, stroking her hair. "You're safe now, you're safe." Martha watched us, a flicker of something akin to sadness in her eyes. "Come on," she said, her voice regaining some of its usual steel. "Let's get her inside. She needs a warm meal and a good night's rest." As we walked away from the auction block, the whispers of the crowd followed us. I didn't care. All that mattered was that Clara was with me. But the questions gnawed at me. How did she end up here? Where was Aunt Martha? And who was behind this? Barbaric trade? The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. Back at the Lucky Nugget, Martha had Clara settled in a quiet room upstairs, clean clothes laid out, a warm meal brought up. I sat downstairs at a secluded table, a steaming cup of coffee in my hand, while Martha poured herself a whiskey. The usual boisterous atmosphere of the saloon felt subdued, a silent acknowledgement of the events of the day. "She's resting now," Martha said, her voice low. "She was in a bad way. Looks like she's been traveling rough for a while." "How did she get here, Martha?" I asked, my voice tight. "She was supposed to be with her Aunt Martha in San Angelo." Martha took a slow sip of her whiskey. "That's the question, isn't it? My guess. Those raiders, the ones who've been hitting homesteads and small towns along the old Butterfield Trail, there's been whispers." My blood ran cold. The raiders. A brutal gang known for their ruthlessness, leaving a trail of destruction and missing persons in their wake. "You think they took her?" "It's more than a think, Silas," Martha replied, her eyes sharp. "I've had a few of my girls hear things from traveling cowboys, rumors of a new pipeline, a network moving unfortunate souls across state lines for sale. Thorne, that snake, he's just the local vendor." "Who's behind it?" I demanded, my hands clenching into fists. Martha shook her head. "No names, not yet, just whispers. Powerful men with connections. They move in the shadows. But Clara, she might know something." Just then, a young man, the same one who had looked sickened at the auction, approached our table. He was still pale, his hands nervously twisting his hat. "Mr. Blackwood," he stammered. "My name's Thomas. I saw what happened. I'm truly sorry." "What is it, son?" I asked, my tone softer than I expected. He seemed genuinely distressed. "I overheard some things before the auction," Thomas confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "The men who brought her in, they were talking. They said she was taken from a small ranch near San Angelo. Said her aunt, well, they didn't say she was dead, but they implied it was a rough scene. And they mentioned a man named Red, just Red. Said he was the one who delivered her." My heart sank. Aunt Martha, my sister-in-law, my chest tightened with a fresh wave of grief and fury. This wasn't just about Clara anymore, this was about vengeance. "Red," I repeated, committing the name to memory. "Did you see what they looked like, these men?" Thomas nodded. Rough-looking, scarred faces. They rode dark horses, no brands I recognized, and one of them had a distinctive red bandana tied around his neck, always. "Red bandana," I muttered, already forming a picture in my mind. Martha listened intently, her expression hardening. "This is big, Silas. Bigger than Thorne. These are the wolves, not just the coyotes. You go after them, you're looking for trouble. It took my daughter Martha, I said, meeting her gaze, my voice unwavering. Trouble's already found me. I'm going after them. I need to know what happened to Aunt Martha, and I need to stop whoever's behind this. Martha sighed, then drained her whiskey. All right, Silas, you're a stubborn fool, always have been. But you're a good man. I'll help you. I've got ears on the ground. I'll ask around, see what more I can dig up about this Red and his crew. Just promise me you'll be careful, and that you'll bring Clara home safe. I nodded. I promise. The path ahead was dangerous, filled with shadows and uncertainty, but I wouldn't walk it alone. And I wouldn't rest until every man responsible for this suffering paid the price. The next morning, Clara was still frail but clearer-eyed. She recounted the horrifying tale, the raid on Aunt Martha's ranch, the brutal men who took her, the long, terrifying journey, and the chilling realization that she was being sold. Aunt Martha, she said, had tried to fight them off, but they had overwhelmed her. Clara didn't know if she was alive or dead, only that she had been left behind. My grief for Martha mingled with a renewed surge of rage. I spent the day making preparations. Jed, true to his word, sold the remaining geldings, giving me enough cash for supplies. I bought a new rifle, extra ammunition, and provisions for a long journey. Martha, meanwhile, had gathered more information. The name Red keeps coming up with a gang operating out of the Badlands north of here, she informed me, handing me a crudely drawn map with a marked X. They're ruthless, Silas, and they're connected to a bigger operation. The money they're making off these sales is significant. Thank you, Martha, I said, my voice thick with gratitude. I won't forget this. Just bring that girl home. Safe? She replied, her eyes softening as she glanced towards the room where Clara was resting. And be careful, Silas. The West doesn't forget a debt owed. Before I left, I sat with Clara, holding her hand. I need to go, darling, I explained gently. I need to find out what happened to Aunt Martha, and I need to make sure these men can't hurt anyone else. Her eyes, still shadowed with fear, held a flicker of understanding. Be careful, Papa, she whispered. Come back to me. Always, I promised, kissing her forehead. I entrusted her to Martha's care, knowing she would be safe. My journey north was a grueling one, through sun-baked plains and treacherous canyons. I rode hard, my mind focused on one thing: justice. The images of Clara in chains, of Aunt Martha fighting for her, fueled my resolve. I encountered hardened prospectors, wary ranchers, and the occasional lonely settler, gathering snippets of information, confirming the grim reputation of Red and his gang. Weeks turned into a relentless pursuit. I finally tracked them to a hidden encampment deep within the Badlands, a desolate place where only outlaws dared to tread. The air was heavy with the smell of wood smoke and the faint metallic tang of stale blood. I staked out the camp for 2 days, observing their movements, their numbers, their habits. Red was there, his red bandana a stark beacon of his depravity. The final confrontation was swift and brutal. I moved under the cover of darkness, relying on years of frontier experience. There was no glory in it, only grim necessity. I fought not with rage, but with a cold, calculated determination. The sounds of gunfire echoed through the canyon, followed by an eerie silence. By dawn, Red and his gang were no more. Among their meager possessions, I found a small, tarnished locket I recognized as Aunt Martha's. My heart ached, confirming my worst fears. She was gone. I rode back to Fort Worth, weary but resolute. The journey was solitary, but no longer truly lonely. I carried the weight of what I had done and the heavy burden of my sister-in-law's death, but also the fragile hope of a new beginning. When I rode into Fort Worth, Martha was waiting, her face etched with relief when she saw me. Clara ran out, her eyes shining, and threw herself into my arms. This time her embrace was strong, filled with a vibrant hope that had been absent before. We stood there, father and daughter, a silent testament to survival and resilience. The West was a harsh mistress, full of loss and hardship, but it also held the promise of a future built on the strength of family, the kindness of strangers, and the unwavering belief that even in the darkest of times, hope could still find a way. Home. My journey was far from over, but with Clara by my side I knew we could face anything.